I work for Havas. I work in the Havas Passion Hub, which is the innovation hub, where 3 innovation verticals are developed. The first one is voice-first technologies. The second is all innovation in digital audio. The third is Metaverse, which is the one that has consumed almost 80% of our time in the last year and a half. And now a few months ago, we have created the hub to give our clients also a solution on generative AI solutions. They were talking earlier in the roundtable about the Metaverse is dead. The Metaverse is not dead. The problem we have had, and I think we've shot ourselves in the foot, the communication people with the Metaverse concept, is to allow it to be cataloged as a trend. Because trends can disappear, evolutions cannot. So when we started to talk about Metaverse, we even considered the name HMetaverse because of the damage it could be doing, and we decided to keep it because we don't have to be afraid. We have called it in a certain way, and it is the evolution of the internet, not cataloging it as a trend. In fact, the other day we were in a project with Pear, and when you go to the general public, you ask them, you go to someone in the street and you say, hey, what website are you on? In the 1, in the 2, in the 3? They have no idea, nor are they interested. They know that they are evolving in their internet experience, and this is what is going to happen with the concept of Metaverse and Web3. I am here to talk to you about brands and the new relationships between agencies and brands. We know in Havas that the future of the advertising model, as we conceive it today, has an expiration date, and that is why we created this Passion Hub, and we try to anticipate these innovation trends to create new business spheres where we can continue developing our products and services. But we have to make the brands understand that this is the case. We have to do a very educational job with them. We have to do what I just told you before. Don't talk about Web3. Don't talk about Web2. We are in a transition to an evolution, and you have to adapt to these new environments, to these new generations that are interacting in a different way. This is a meaningful brand study that Havas publishes every 2 years. Last week, they published the update, and in the last one, they told us that this is super interesting, that 75% of the brands could disappear and nobody would be interested. So it is shocking, right? So when you go to the street and you say, it's okay, if this brand or that brand disappears, people have begun to lose their loyalty to brands. The second is only 47% of brands are seen as trustworthy. They're a little bit fed up with those unfulfilled promises of value from brands, and 71% of respondents are very tired of empty promises. So this is something that we have to work on from brands and agencies to change this perception that the public currently has, and especially the new generations may have, of our brands. And they tell us that in this study, we have to move from words to deeds, that all these promises of value that we are saying we are going to fulfill become realities, that there has to be a social responsibility. That is, that brands invest part of the benefits they obtain in actions with social responsibility, in taking care of the ecosystem, both environmentally and socially. So they are demanding that these brands have that commitment, and they are loyal to those brands that acquire that commitment. And then there are new forms of connection. Let's see. We are wanting to connect, as Christina said before, with Generation Z, and there is a reason for that. Now, we will see. We will see it later, but if we want to connect with that Generation Z, we have to go where they are. And with the languages they have, it is not enough to apply strategies. I am not going to call the current strategies Web 2, because I have just demystified Web 2 and Web 3, but let's call it that. To understand each other, Web 2 strategies are not valid for Web 3 environments, for communities and new generations. What are brands looking for? Voluntary consumption. That's what they are always looking for, and what they are doing is using much more experiential environments. That's what we recommend to the brands that work with us, that they have to start generating content in a different way. We'll look at that later. And new ways to connect, influencers, content, and now the metaverse. And what is the intention? The metaverse? Well, the metaverse is a new point of contact that is under construction, which is something we have to take into account, which is ready to be a channel of interaction. Everything that is metaverse and Web3 environment is eminently interactive. And that is something that brands have to take into account when delivering their new models of advertising content, which allows to continue building the brand's imaginary and through a different content. We are moving from storytelling to story living. In other words, brands are going to have to start delivering their content through experiences and get used to that. The other day, I was in a session, and there was a professor who was doing an experience on how advertising works and so on. And he said, and he commented on it, There are studies that children become blind when they are watching a game or are in any environment of this advertising. And he was telling a 6-year-old child said to another, "Don't worry, this will end in 3 seconds." In other words, it is amazing to see how these new generations become blind to this environment, but they do not become blind to the experiences. If you, as a brand, provide them with an experience that is positive for them, they will interact with that experience. What do they have to do? First, analyze your current positioning. Who are you? What is your purpose? What are your customers, your tone and manner? What products and services? What channels do they have? It is not enough to reach the metaverse, as we have seen many experiences during the last year and the previous one that we suffered. And the briefing was, I want a news in the PR. And we said, really? If I want to appear as an innovative brand where I get PR and so on, well, let's make a content strategy or a strategy of your immersion in this new environment that is sustainable over time, and then it will be worth it. Then many clients understood it, and some of them decided to work with others. Why am I here? No. This is a new sales channel. Kai was saying it just now. Brands also have to consider that from now on, you can have 2 product channels and 2 different distribution channels. Nike has understood this perfectly and launches its Air Jordans constantly and all its physical products. And now it also has a new channel to launch a virtual product that has a price, because these new generations, there is a paradigm shift that is the concept of digital possession. To me, a few years ago, you would say, buy a virtual Nike for $100, and come on, to anyone. Most of you would have been the same. But now these new generations are willing to pay for that physical product, sometimes even more for the virtual product than for the physical product. And this is something that brands have to take into account when it comes to interacting with these new sales channels and these new product channels and being connected with the Z generation. And this makes sense. And also, Christina was saying it before, and that is that when you make a strategic reflection of why Louis Vuitton or Cupra or Gucci are doing all these developments, I have said it before, I'm not going to sell a car there. I'm not going to sell a Roblox car. The people of Hyundai nor Gucci, although they said they sold a bag for $4,000, they sold one, and we do not know very well if it was a PR issue or it was a reality. But in order for these new generations to understand the value of our brand, we have to work on awareness with these generations. When we go to advertising performance models, if you notice, they go in the opposite direction to brand awareness. And in the end, we become a brand that launches budgets for performance and budgets for programmatic, where it has not worked before on branding. And what happens? Well, imagine you are going to buy some Michelin. You never know what they have meant in the world of Michelin or what a Gucci bag has meant, and you don't give it the value that you have to pay $4,000 for a bag, for a Gucci bag. If you don't work that branding right away, you can't interact. That's why brands like Gucci, Louis Vuitton, the whole fashion world is making an approach to what is the metaverse and Web3, because their target is aging. They need to rejuvenate it. So if they don't rejuvenate it, we know what's going to happen at the end of that road. There is a need for attraction. We need to keep bringing audiences to this web environment, to this metaverse. It is not enough to make an action as a brand and then not give it a budget for communication or not connect it with the rest of your channels. This is not growing. In other words, we must also communicate what is happening there, what we are doing there, or what kind of differential experiences we are proposing, right? Thinking has to be long-term. This goes against what I was telling you before about many brands that did PR actions and that's it. That has been counterproductive for the brand, because in the end, you find many people who said, hey, enter Decentraland and I have entered the space of this brand of beer, and nothing happens there. So it is counterproductive to do that, because you generate frustration in the user's expectations when he enters there. And in the end, it is bad for the user because he stops believing in the promise of value that we have said that the brands have to make, and that they do not fulfill it when they get to this environment. So we have to think very strategically when it comes to immersing brands in the metaverse and have constant content. In other words, you have to have a content agenda. In other words, as I was saying, you cannot enter the Decentraland milestone and nothing is happening. This works like any other communication campaign we have seen so far. You need to provide it with content and experiences so that users remain interested in staying connected with you. If you're constantly looping, imagine an ad that's looping for 5 years. No one would pay attention to it at the end. Well, this is exactly the same thing. You have to keep renewing the content constantly. The elephant in the room. The metrics want to compare us. They want to compare all the actions in Web3 and Metaverse with those with the current KPIs of the digital models. They never stand up to comparison. Never, because we are not at that point. That's the big mistake. The point we are at right now is awareness. It is at the point of creating branding and generating awareness of our brand. No, let's not ask for performance, conversion, CTR, or anything like that. What we have to measure is what awareness my brand is having with these new generations and what impact I am having on them. And if I know how to reach them, above all, it is a strategy that we are going to see now of test and learn, right? What do they have to do? What is the evolution of brands? Developing strategies based on gamification is important because these new environments, these new generations are native to gaming. They are constantly growing in gamification environments, creating immersive experiences, taking advantage of everything that the people from Immersive XR have told us, all the new trends and new technological solutions that immersive technologies are providing us with. Transferring the current audience to these virtual worlds. What does that mean? It's like the iPhone. When the first smartphone arrived, my parents saw it and they thought it was a horror. They didn't understand what, and you remember the phrase, there's no way I'm going to be connected all day. Let's look at ourselves now. So these new audiences are going to end up entering these Web3 environments. But above all, and Per says it many times, they don't have to know about blockchain or Web3 or anything like that. They have to enter. That is, when you enter a website, you are not an HTML programmer or anything like that. You just enter and use it. And what we will be evolving in all Web3 environments in that entry barrier that we have right now. For those people who are more technologically challenged, that will move forward and the entry will be much, much easier in the next few years. We have to have a focus on the alpha generation, the Z generation, and the young millennials. You ask any brand, hey, can you disconnect from a generation that is between 18 and 25 years old? Here, brands and all of them will tell you no way if you don't want to jeopardize your future. So it's important that we focus on these generations, even if the economic business impact is not real at the moment. But we have to work with them, as we said before, don't we? We have to create collectibles and work NFTs in a sustainable way and understand NFTs as a valuable product for brands, as an engagement between the physical world and the virtual world. Beyond that speculative moment that has been the curse of NFTs in the last months of last year and this year. And of course, having an always beta attitude, we have to be entering, practicing, falling because the audience right now receives it well. That is, they are starting and understand that you have to have a failure. But right now we are in this issue more or less like in the internet in the 90s, when people made their web pages and many times they did not work well, then the brands had to find their position and their positioning with respect to their audiences through this new environment that was called the internet. And here we are exactly in the same place. We have to start learning to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes to find our space in the coming years in this environment. To that end, we together with Metacampus and Per's team, what we thought last year was we have seen a lot of knowledge events. Last year, there were dozens of talks, papers, roundtables about Metaverse, where everybody was talking about what is going to be the Metaverse and how is the Metaverse going to be and how is the Web3 going to be. And we said, well, why don't we do an event where this becomes a reality? So we created last year, this year, Metaverse 2030. Thank you.
Welcome to MV 2030.
Today is a super big day.
winner is the Baskonia group that... Thank you.
Okay, MV 2030. As I was telling you before, it was the first real activation event with projects that were incubated within that event. There were 2 days where there was a first day where the vision of the specialists in Metaverse, blockchain, Web3, and others was given. But above all, we asked for all the talks to be focused on business. That is how each of these brands or each of these companies was focusing on business, each of their activities. The objective was to turn the event into an activation reference event in the market, to help brands to understand this new stage with which they have to start working with their audiences, and to place Havas, PRISA, and Metacampus, which were the three partners that were working on this project in the era of innovation with respect to brands, right? There was a preparation phase that we will see celebration and then continuity. Where the first part was an ideation of what was the event that we worked very closely with Pere's team and us to develop it. A training process for the brands that we will now see, a very powerful communication campaign that was in the market in May, and a call for participants. Well, these were Metacampus and us. We were, let's say, the precursors of the event, and the media partner was PRISA, the brands that worked on this, the 6 brands that worked on this hackathon that we called Hackathon at the time of Metaverse, the first Metaverse hackathon that was given in Spain were Baskonia, PRISA, Fundación La Caixa, DAM, Wow, and Hyundai, right? We worked with them. First, we had to do workshops with each of them to work with the teams. What did it mean to work on Web3 models and on models and new Metaverse models? These workshops were super curious because in the end, they were all a success. But there were situations in which there were brands that at first saw it from a distance, and then some of them, we had up to 6 workshop meetings because they did not stop wanting more and more and more and more and more and more information. Most of them were like that. The brands, when they saw it and saw the reality and the common sense and the logic behind a Web3 project, they embraced it and wanted to know more about it. It is also true that a specific brand that in the first workshop stood up and didn't want to. They got scared. They said, no, we don't understand this. How can we apply it? How can we apply it? So they literally said, look, we don't want to participate in this, and we moved on. The second workshop was also very focused on the sectorial environment of that brand and how Web3 models were in that sector. A PRISA communication plan that was 1 million euros in all its digital media, in radio, in the press. There was a call for startups. We called different startups through the MV 2030 website to participate in that selection. Then a selection was made. There was a jury that made a technical selection of the companies that applied, and the only requirement was to have an SL behind or represent an academic institution and the presentation of a team of 5 people. From there, we made the selection. The startups were super real until here a little while ago. Kai and Emily with Union Avatar's brand Newverse is Saturn or Waro and Player Nation. The event took place in the Havas space in the village of Madrid. And well, the first day, as I tell you, there were talks where brands like Diageo, Baskonia, PRISA gave their approach from the point of view of media or brands. And then there were roundtables where Waro, who are blockchain specialists, they brought blockchain specialists applied to business models. So what you were seeing is, because a lot of times people talk about blockchain and say, what use case do I find for blockchain? Well, they developed there a lot of use cases that are being seen internationally where blockchain becomes a differentiating technology, right? Another roundtable was led by Metacampus, and finally there were the 3 CEOs of the 3 Spanish metaverses, Legendarium, Utopian, and Outer Ring. It was broadcasted in Utopian, in the Metaverse, and in Legendarium as well, apart from Havas and Metacampus Media. And this is where the magic really happened. When the startup teams got together with the brand teams, usually the brand teams were led by marketing people. They were not technologists, not technology specialists or anything like that. And normally the team that came from the startup were effectively this. In other words, at the beginning, Per and the team that was doing a bit of mentoring with all the teams was like, let's see how this turns out. Because you put them in a room for a whole day, people who knew absolutely nothing about each other, where they are given a briefing that had been previously launched by the brand, and they have to work on that briefing. So it was spectacular to see the chemistry that developed between the brands and the teams, because the brands at the beginning behaved like brands. They came in and said to the startups, you have to do this, this. Then we had to start. Let's see, guys. Let's see. You are not a brand, and they are a startup. You are the same team. You are a startup that launches a project or intends to launch a project to the market. From that point on, they understood that they no longer had to behave as brands, but as marketing specialists and the others as technology specialists. And that is where it developed. They had until 5 or 6 in the afternoon when they had space. Each and every one of the teams told us, 1 more hour, please. In other words, there was tension. There were people who did not come down to eat. That is, they took it quite seriously. And in the end, this came out. 6 projects came out, each one better than the other. Well, Kling, who was part of the jury as a business angel, said that it was very difficult to give one more than the others, and so on. Well, in the end, there had to be a winner, which was Baskonia with Saturno. What they proposed was the development of a tool, which they are doing, to help children and adolescent gamers to treat their mental health and the frustration that can be generated at any given time by a competitive environment such as gaming. But not from the point of view, we are going to take care of you, but we are going to train you so that your emotional well-being is optimal when it comes to this. So the kids embrace it. This is a training, but really it's also a training that is focused on their emotional stability. So it's a fantastic project. The next one was the top 40. They have a problem that they recognize is connecting with new audiences and young audiences. And it developed. Well, the specialists who were with them were Roblox specialists. They are one of the biggest Roblox specialists in Spain. And they developed a project to generate a Latin club in Roblox where, apart from concerts that we have already seen, for example, Aitana and others, there were also going to be new promises that could have meet and greet with the audiences or stars that are already coming to range. So it was interesting to see how they connected with those new audiences. Ticket Booster, which was Waro's company that I was telling you before, specialists in blockchain or specialists in ticketing. With DAM, they generated a platform to accommodate those brands. In other words, DAM has a very strong presence at festivals. So, of course, to go to a festival, you need to be a big brand and put a large amount of money that gives you a series of benefits. They proposed to generate a platform where smaller brands could give certain advantages at a much cheaper price to a specific number of visitors or festival goers. Smart Play, the project of Kai and Union Avatars with WoW, you all know, I think, is the concept store. The concept retail in Madrid is a store of the future, let's say. So they need to improve the experience a lot, and above all, detect what is happening in their store and what is happening in the cold spots of their store. The Kai team developed a platform. We are pending now in the next week to have the next meeting with WoW to see how the project is progressing. And they developed this platform to detect these hotspots through gamification. The avatar is created, different garments are placed on the avatar throughout the store, and people locate them, and they get information that is then shared with the customer, and they get a series of insights that are super interesting for them. Nick is a virtual assistant for Hyundai with artificial intelligence, with a tokenization model and the generation of a community. Meta Educasha wanted to promote a platform that would unite teachers and students in a new educational environment. So what the Playoff Nation team did was to create this virtual environment connection platform with artificial intelligence of new learning models. To comply with a briefing that Educasha had given them, a double jury of a technical jury where there was Per and some of us, and then a jury of business angels where there was Kling, Lumo Labs, and other venture capitals that what they did was to judge the viability of the project, which could not be this, and they told all the teams that it was not about loony ideas. Yeah, in other words, this has to be a viable product that goes to market, and that has a business plan behind it that could be carried out, which is what they all did, right? Well, here we see a little bit of the objectives we are pursuing, what we passed on to all the teams. The continuity of the event is to make the ideas come true, which is the key. That at least of these 6 projects for us, we said that if there had been 2, it would have been fine, but we believe that there are going to be more than 2. For brands and for partners, it is an opportunity because they enter again in these new concepts of Web3 and Metaverse. And this will be the first of many steps. I look forward to Metaverse 2030.